Thank you, readers. Perfected Lord Empyrean stood respectfully outside the door. As the door of the quiet room slowly opened, Lin Feng's figure appeared. Lin Feng slowly walked out of the quiet room. A strange glint flashed across his eyes as he said, "Where are the ruins of the diabolic divine palace? City Lord. The ruins of the diabolic divine palace are in the depths of the Sky Python Mountain." Sky Python Mountain? Lin Feng frowned slightly when he heard this. He knew that the Sky Python Mountain was one of the famous forbidden places on the hallowed beast continent. The legendary head of that hallowed beast transformed into the Sky Python Mountain. Hence, it had all kinds of miraculous aspects. Even some chaotic spirit beasts born in the Sky Python Mountain were very terrifying, far stronger than some ordinary chaotic spirit beasts. In fact, some perfected lords had even fallen in the Sky Python Mountain. Hence, the Sky Python Mountain was also known as one of the most dangerous forbidden places in the hallowed beast continent. That's right, it's the Sky Python Mountain, one of the most dangerous forbidden places on the hallowed beast continent. We did everything we could to collect all kinds of information, all of which pointed to the ruins of the diabolic divine palace in the depths of the Sky Python Mountain. However, there are too many chaotic spirit beasts in the Sky Python Mountain. Even a perfected lord can't enter. Once they enter, they'll probably never be able to come out. Hence, no one knows the specifics on the ruins of the diabolic divine palace. Lin Feng nodded. He was already very satisfied that the investigation had come to this point. I see. You've done very well. Lin Feng waved his hand, and perfected Lord Empyrean bade farewell and left. I hope the ruins of the diabolic divine palace won't disappoint me. Lin Feng began to contemplate. In the past 10 years, he had presided over Mystic Sky City, and had almost never encountered any difficulties in Mystic Sky City. Even if there were any obstructions, Lin Feng would personally resolve them. Hence, the current Mystic Sky City had more than 100 citadels and dozens of chaotic perfected lords under its command. Its sphere of influence covered millions of kilometers. It was one of the largest factions in the entire hallowed beast continent. However, this small faction was still inferior to those chaotic dire beasts, let alone powerful enough to completely turn the situation of the hallowed beast continent around. Lin Feng's cultivation also reached a bottleneck. It was not that his internal universe had reached a bottleneck, but that his cultivation at the perfected spirit realm had reached a bottleneck. Over the past 10 years, Lin Feng had also refined many chaotic spirit beasts and countless chaotic dire beasts. Hence, the diameter of his internal universe had already reached a terrifying 100 billion light-years, almost comparable to an ordinary origin universe. As long as there was energy, Lin Feng's internal universe could continue to expand. However, Lin Feng was still unable to become a perfected deity. In fact, his comprehension of the chaotic rules was surprisingly slow. But now, in the past 10 years, Lin Feng's comprehension of the chaotic rule of fire had seen almost no improvement. It was as if he had reached a critical point and was always stuck, unable to comprehend more. If Lin Feng could not comprehend the chaotic rules, he would never be able to become a chaotic perfected deity. This was a major matter in cultivation. Hence, Lin Feng collected all kinds of information and found a legend about the diabolic divine palace. It was rumored that at the beginning of the hallowed beast continent, a great entity established the diabolic divine palace. The diabolic divine palace was open to a wide range of disciples. Be it human cultivators or chaotic dire beasts, they could all enter the diabolic divine palace. The diabolic deity who established the diabolic divine palace was actually a perfected deity, or a chaotic divine beast. No one knew the exact identity of the diabolic deity, but at that time, the diabolic divine palace treated chaotic dire beasts and human cultivators equally. However, later on, for some reason, the diabolic divine palace seemed to have disappeared overnight. Even the mountain gate could not be found. As time passed, the diabolic divine palace gradually became a myth on the hallowed beast continent. However, Lin Feng's eyes lit up. As the saying went, there was no smoke without fire. Legends would not come from nowhere, and moreover, it had been passed down for so long. Hence, after learning about the legend of the diabolic divine palace, Lin Feng mobilized the faction of the Mystic Sky City and began to collect all kinds of information about the diabolic Divine Palace. In the end, after sorting out the clues, all kinds of signs pointed to the fact that the diabolic Divine Palace had indeed existed. Lin Feng got people to search for the ruins of the diabolic Divine Palace. After a few years, they actually found it. Since they had found the diabolic Divine Palace, Lin Feng naturally had to make a trip. Otherwise, wouldn't all the information collected over the years be a waste of effort? Moreover, Lin Feng was also very curious about how the diabolic Divine Palace could accommodate both chaotic dire beasts and human cultivators. He was even more confused about the destruction of the diabolic Divine Palace overnight. It seemed like there were still many secrets hidden in this hallowed beast continent. The power of the Mystic Sky City was no longer what it used to be. The Mystic Sky City itself was incomparably safe. There were hundreds of cities guarding it in all directions. It might be the safest city on the hallowed beast continent. Lin Feng gave perfected Lord Empyrean some simple instructions, then flew towards the Sky Python Mountain alone with Ao. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on the forest, casting the withered leaves in a faint golden sheen. Swoosh! A black shadow descended from the sky, stirring up leaves. This is the Sky Python Mountain? Apart from the verdant forest, there did not seem to be anything special about the Sky Python Mountain. Wasn't it said that there are many chaotic dire beasts in the Sky Python Mountain, and even powerful chaotic spirit beasts that can kill perfected lords? Where did these chaotic spirit beasts go? Lin Feng scanned with his mental power. There was actually not a single chaotic spirit beast within a radius of hundreds of kilometers. There were only some chaotic dire beasts patrolling the Sky Python Mountain. This was very different from the rumors. As one of the most dangerous forbidden places on the hallowed beast continent, it was impossible for it to be so peaceful. What happened at the Sky Python Mountain? Lin Feng acutely sensed that something was amiss about the Sky Python Mountain. Boom! Suddenly, the ground shook. It was like an earthquake, and it was still shaking. The entire huge Sky Python Mountain was shaking. Lin Feng's eyes narrowed slightly. Then, he sensed terrifying fluctuations coming from the depths of the Sky Python Mountain. Even the chaotic aura formed a storm that swept over. A fight? It doesn't seem to be just chaotic spirit beasts. There are also cultivators. Lin Feng could clearly sense that the violent, almost uncontrollable chaotic aura. Chaotic spirit beasts did not have such an ability. Even a chaotic perfected lord did not have such an ability. Moreover, such fluctuations were so great that they were like rolling waves, each higher than the last. It seemed like something major had indeed happened at the Sky Python Mountain. No wonder not a single chaotic spirit beast had been discovered in hundreds of kilometers. Ao, catch up with it. Lin Feng patted Ao's head. They instantly transformed into a stream of light, traversing towards the depths of the Sky Python Mountain. Gore! Thank you, readers. Another earth-shattering roar spread throughout the entire Sky Python Mountain. Lin Feng rode Ao and quickly approached the source. Ha! Lin Feng focused his gaze. There were indeed chaotic spirit beasts ahead, and there was not just one, but a total of 3. These 3 chaotic spirit beasts were of different sizes, but they all emitted terrifying auras. They were definitely not ordinary chaotic spirit beasts. The 3 chaotic spirit beasts wore furious expressions, but they were looking at the cultivator in the middle with some wariness. That cultivator's white clothes fluttered, and her black hair fluttered in the wind. Her figure was graceful, and her face was exquisite. She was actually a woman. Even Lin Feng, who had transcended from the origin universe and traveled the chaos, had never seen such an elegant and beautiful woman. In terms of beauty, perhaps only the queen he had met in the Incendium continent could compare to her. The woman was surrounded by the 3 chaotic spirit beasts. Although her expression was solemn, there was no fear in her eyes. Instead, she appeared very calm. In his hand was an iridescent glass pagoda. It looked vivid, as if it was a living thing, rather than a treasure. Even Lin Feng could sense the terrifying power emitted by the iridescent glass pagoda. The iridescent glazed pagoda, a chaotic spirit treasure? A thought flashed through Lin Feng's mind, and a name came to him. Perfected Lord Ziyuan. Lin Feng quickly had a guess in his mind. Before Lin Feng, the only person who could really be considered the #1 perfected lord in the entire Hallowed Beast continent was this perfected Lord Ziyuan. The reason was very simple. Not only was perfected Lord Ziyuan a top-notch perfected lord in terms of her own power, she even had a chaotic spirit treasure called the iridescent glazed pagoda. Could suppress, trap, and kill chaotic spirit beasts. It was rumored that perfected Lord Ziyuan was also an undefeated perfected lord who had cultivated in the chaos for billions of years. She had roamed the chaos for countless years before descending to the Hallowed Beast continent. Then, she established the Ziyuan city and used her spirit treasure to kill 5 chaotic spirit beasts. For a time, her reputation shook the entire Hallowed Beast continent. Everyone knew perfected Lord Ziyuan's name. However, the current top perfected lord was Lin Feng. Perfected Lord Ziyuan had not acted at all the entire time, as if she did not care about the empty title of the top perfected lord at all. Originally, Lin Feng was very curious about chaotic spirit treasures. He had never seen a chaotic spirit treasure before, so he also wanted to visit perfected Lord Ziyuan in Ziyuan City and take the opportunity to see the chaotic spirit treasure. Unexpectedly, he ran into perfected Lord Ziyuan at the Sky Python Mountain now. The 3 chaotic spirit beasts seemed to be very wary of perfected Lord Ziyuan's iridescent glazed pagoda. Hence, although they all surrounded perfected Lord Ziyuan, they did not pounce forward. Perfected Lord Ziyuan, you've already been to the Sky Python Mountain twice. The forbidden place lies ahead, and the great king is inside. If you barge in without permission, only death awaits you. One of the chaotic spirit beasts said threateningly in a low voice. However, Ziyuan was unmoved. Her long hair fluttered, and her gaze was incomparably sharp. King? It's that old flood dragon, right? Does it really think it's a true dragon just because it has a trace of the bloodline of a true dragon? I know that the old flood dragon wants to comprehend the prohibitions of the diabolic divine palace, but after comprehending them for hundreds of thousands of years, it's still loitering outside the diabolic divine palace. Why not let me go in? Perhaps I can break the prohibitions of the diabolic divine palace. Perfected Lord Ziyuan, no matter what you say, we won't let you pass. Your chaotic spirit treasure is indeed very powerful, but there's still no way you can get past us. The 3 chaotic spirit beasts all had some divine beast bloodlines, and were all mutants. They were willing to hide in the Sky Python Mountain not because they were really lurking, but because of the diabolic divine palace. The diabolic divine palace really exists. Lin Feng was elated. It was good as long as the legend was confirmed to be true. It seemed like perfected Lord Ziyuan had long known that there was a diabolic divine palace in the depths of the Sky Python Mountain. She seemed to also have come a few times but failed every time. With the obstruction of these 3 chaotic spirit beasts, even perfected Lord Ziyuan could not enter. Boom! The iridescent glazed pagoda slammed down hard. The 3 chaotic spirit beasts roared at the sky. A powerful aura appeared on their bodies, which did not seem to match their auras. It should be the aura of the divine beast bloodline in their bodies. It turned out that these 3 chaotic spirit beasts were actually also descendants of divine beasts. They had a trace of the bloodline of divine beasts, and could be considered mutants. No wonder they were much stronger than ordinary chaotic spirit beasts. Even ordinary perfected lords might be killed by them if they were not careful. If the 3 chaotic spirit beasts joined forces, ordinary perfected lords would definitely die. However, perfected Lord Ziyuan was not an ordinary perfected lord. She had a chaotic spirit treasure. The iridescent glazed pagoda suddenly shook, but it was forcefully blocked by the 3 chaotic spirit beasts. The circles of halos seemed to contain infinite pressure, suppressing the 3 chaotic spirit beasts until they roared repeatedly and struggled to breathe. However, the 3 chaotic spirit beasts were not at the end of their rope. Clearly, the iridescent glazed pagoda was indeed very powerful, but it was still very difficult for it to suppress these 3 chaotic spirit beasts. The iridescent glazed pagoda was a chaotic spirit treasure. What was a spirit treasure? Now, Lin Feng had learned something new. Once the spirit treasure was unleashed, Perfected Lord Ziyuan could even disregard everything, and the spirit treasure could naturally fight the enemies. It only required Perfected Lord Ziyuan to expend a very small portion of her mental power. If it was just a strange chaotic spirit beast, even with the bloodline of a divine beast, it would probably not be a match for Perfected Lord Ziyuan, as expected of the former top Perfected Lord of the Hallowed Beast continent. She was indeed very extraordinary. These 3 chaotic spirit beast mutants were also very extraordinary. As mutants, they were stronger than ordinary chaotic spirit beasts to begin with, and could even kill ordinary perfected lords. However, Lin Feng looked at these 3 chaotic spirit beasts. They were much inferior to the torch dragon. When both mutated chaotic spirit beasts and had the bloodline of divine beasts, they should be compared in terms of the innate divine ability contained in the bloodline of divine beasts. The torch dragon's innate divine ability was time standstill, which was related to the rule of time. What could compare to it? Thud. Perfected Lord Ziyuan flipped her hand. There was another short sword that emitted a gray light and an incomparably fierce aura, spooking the 3 chaotic spirit beasts. Swish. Perfected Lord Ziyuan pointed with her finger, and the short sword instantly flew out, stabbing towards the 3 chaotic spirit beasts. Another chaotic spirit treasure? The 3 chaotic spirit beasts were shocked. The fact that Perfected Lord Ziyuan had a chaotic spirit treasure was already enough to make them suffer indescribably. They could only passively take hits and resist with all their might. But now, Perfected Lord Ziyuan had actually obtained another chaotic spirit treasure. How could they fight like this? Thump. The short sword pierced into the body of one of the chaotic spirit beasts, but it only made a small hole. Even though the sword aura inside churned, it did not cause much damage to the chaotic spirit beast. It's not a chaotic spirit treasure. It just developed a little sentience. It's a half-finished product. The 3 chaotic spirit beasts heaved a sigh of relief. It was good that it was not a chaotic spirit treasure. As long as it was not a chaotic spirit treasure, with the divine beast bloodline in their bodies, even Perfected Lord Ziyuan could not do anything to them. Is it still not enough? Seeing that the short sword could not do anything to the 3 chaotic spirit beasts, Perfected Lord Ziyuan frowned slightly. It was not easy for her to obtain this short sword, and it contained a trace of sentience. However, it was very, very difficult for such chaotic artifacts to completely metamorphose into chaotic spirit treasures. A half-chaotic spirit treasure was almost their limit. Such a half-chaotic spirit treasure was very intimidating against ordinary chaotic spirit beasts, but against these 3 mutant chaotic spirit beasts, it was not enough. She had already tried 3 times but failed every time, and could not pass through the obstruction of the 3 chaotic spirit beasts. After this failure, Perfected Lord Ziyuan did not know when she could come again. She could only shake her head, retrieve her short sword, and prepare to leave. Ha! Suddenly, Perfected Lord Ziyuan sensed an obscure aura. It was the aura of a chaotic dire beast. It was normal for there to be chaotic dire beasts in the Sky Python Mountain, but this was the territory of 3 mutated chaotic spirit beasts. What chaotic dire beast would dare to approach? Who is it? Perfected Lord Ziyuan looked in a certain direction. Even the 3 chaotic spirit beasts were slightly stunned. But then, they also sensed an obscure trace of a chaotic dire beast. Hence, they all growled in low voices, their faces filled with caution. I've been discovered? Lin Feng looked at Ao below him and shook his head. He knew that it was not that himself who had been discovered, but Ao. After all, Ao was a chaotic dire beast. Lin Feng had been careless and only used the cosmic power to conceal himself, but forgot to conceal Ao. However, so be it. Since Lin Feng had been discovered, he did not hide anymore. He retracted his cosmic power and slowly walked out of the depths of the forest. Gore! Thank you, readers. Lin Feng slowly walked out of the depths of the forest. Ao also roared at the 3 chaotic spirit beasts, as if it was not afraid of these 3 chaotic spirit beasts at all. This surprised the 3 chaotic spirit beasts, and even Perfected Lord Ziyuan. This was also the first time she had seen a chaotic dire beast that dared to roar at chaotic spirit beasts. Lin Feng patted Ao's head, and Ao stopped. Perfected Lord Ziyuan, I originally wanted to visit you. I didn't expect to meet you at the Sky Python Mountain. Lin Feng smiled. There did not seem to be any fear or nervousness in his eyes. Huh? You know me? Perfected Lord Ziyuan stared at Lin Feng, but he didn't seem familiar at all to her. She was sure she had never met Lin Feng before, but if Lin Feng could call her by name at once, he clearly knew something about her. Perfected Lord Ziyuan is famous. Who in the hallowed beast continent doesn't know about you? Originally, I wasn't sure either, but after seeing you holding the iridescent glazed pagoda, I can be certain. Lin Feng said indifferently. Realization dawned on Perfected Lord Ziyuan. Her iridescent glazed pagoda was a chaotic spirit treasure, and was also famous in the hallowed beast continent. Its characteristics were too obvious, and this was a very easy guess. May I know your name, Perfected Lord? Perfected Lord Ziyuan's eyes were bright, and she did not underestimate Lin Feng at all. Only a fool or a powerful perfected lord with something to rely on could come to the Sky Python Mountain alone and still be so relaxed, not taking these chaotic spirit beasts seriously at all. How could Lin Feng be a fool? That was impossible. He could only be a peak perfected lord. Perfected Lord, you're welcome. My name is Lin Feng. Lin Feng. Perfected Lord Ziyuan frowned, as if she was thinking about if there was any top-notch perfected lord on the hallowed beast continent called Lin Feng. Suddenly, an thought flashed through her mind, and she seemed to have some impression. Lin Feng, perfected Lord Lin of Mystic Sky City? A strange look flashed across perfected Lord Ziyuan's eyes. That's right, it's me. Lin Feng was no longer unknown. With the establishment of Mystic Sky City, Lin Feng's name had quickly spread throughout the entire hallowed beast continent, and he was even known as the top perfected lord. So you're the top perfected lord? Perfected Lord Ziyuan's heart skipped a beat. She had some ties with this Lin Feng. After all, Lin Feng's had taken the title as the top perfected lord from her. Previously, Perfected Lord Ziyuan was publicly recognized as the #1 perfected lord in the hallowed beast continent. However, as Lin Feng rose to prominence, especially in the battle when the Mystic Sky City was established, he subdued countless perfected lords. The title of the top perfected lord naturally went to Lin Feng. Did perfected Lord Lin come to the Sky Python Mountain for the diabolic divine palace too? Perfected Lord Ziyuan said directly. It was obvious that she also knew that Lin Feng must have concealed himself for a period of time previously. Lin Feng should have already heard everything she said to the 3 mutated chaotic spirit beasts, so there was nothing much to hide. There's really a diabolic divine palace? Lin Feng asked Perfected Lord Ziyuan instead of replying directly. Of course there are, and they're inside. However, these 3 chaotic spirit beasts are blocking the way. Even I can't head to the ruins of the diabolic divine palace. I wonder if Perfected Lord Lin has a solution. Perfected Lord Ziyuan was not in a hurry to leave. She wanted to see Lin Feng's methods. Perhaps with Lin Feng's help, she could also fulfill her lifelong wish and enter the ruins of the diabolic divine palace. Human perfected lords, leave quickly. You should not enter this place. If you do not leave now, we'll start a massacre. We can only send you to reincarnate and cultivate again. The 3 chaotic spirit beasts could no longer sit still. This human perfected lord had arrived calmly and showed no fear at all. Clearly, he was not easy to deal with either. Moreover, he could converse with Perfected Lord Ziyuan as equals. That was even more extraordinary. They were not stupid, and would not underestimate Perfected Lord Ziyuan. It had to be known that it took the combination of 3 mutant chaotic spirit beasts to barely stop Perfected Lord Ziyuan. If someone on par with Perfected Lord Ziyuan came, they would probably be in trouble. Lin Feng ignored the 3 mutated chaotic spirit beasts completely. Instead, he said to Perfected Lord Ziyuan, "Of course there's no solution. Perfected Lord has come to the Sky Python Mountain 3 times, but you haven't been able to think of a better solution. What good solution can I come up with?" Hearing this, Perfected Lord Ziyuan's expression fell, and she was also a little disappointed. In order to enter the ruins of the diabolic divine palace, she had indeed tried everything she could. She had spent tens of thousands of years on the hallowed beast continent. Unfortunately, up until now, she still had no way to pass through the obstruction of these three chaotic spirit beasts. She had not even seen the ruins of the diabolic divine palace. However, although there's no good solution, there's a stupid solution, and that is to defeat these three mutated chaotic spirit beasts. Then, won't we be able to find the ruins of the diabolic divine palace? Perfected Lord Ziyuan shook his head and said, "If I could defeat them, I would have done so long ago. However, these are three mutant chaotic spirit beasts with the bloodlines of divine beasts. Defeating them is easier said than done." "Is that so?" Lin Feng walked over slowly. The world phantom vaguely appeared behind him, and he emitted a terrifying aura. Even the three chaotic spirit beasts seemed to have encountered their natural enemy. They growled softly and kept retreating. Just from their auras, they felt immense pressure, and there was a faint sense of great danger and terror. "This is?" Perfected Lord Ziyuan's eyes lit up as well. Disbelief appeared in her eyes, and the expression on her face was incomparably shocked. Even though Lin Feng's cosmic power did not affect Perfected Lord Ziyuan, that power still stunned Perfected Lord Ziyuan. "This power, he's not a perfected deity, but it feels like I'm facing a perfected deity. Is it some kind of special chaotic spirit treasure?" Many thoughts flashed through Perfected Lord Ziyuan's mind. She was not a cultivator from the hallowed beast continent, but came from the depths of the chaos and had a powerful background. In fact, Perfected Lord Ziyuan had even seen a perfected deity before. The aura of a perfected deity was naturally incomparably powerful, as vast and invincible as the entire chaos. Lin Feng's aura was not as domineering as a perfected deity's, but just his raw strength had the faint shadow of a perfected deity. Hence, Perfected Lord Ziyuan suspected that Lin Feng also possessed a powerful and special chaotic spirit treasure. Otherwise, how could Lin Feng have such a terrifying aura? There were sounds of wailing. Perfected Lord Ziyuan had no idea how much pressure the three mutant chaotic spirit beasts were enduring at this moment. Lin Feng walked over step by step. He did not even attack. He had only mobilized a portion of the power in his internal universe. Even so, just a portion of the power in the internal universe still gave the three chaotic spirit beasts a sense of great danger and terror. After all, Lin Feng was no longer the same as before. He could even suppress the torch dragon. The diameter of his internal universe exceeded 100 billion light-years, comparable to an ordinary origin universe. Even if only a tenth of such a terrifying power was leaked, it would still be earth-shattering. Suppress. Lin Feng stopped in his tracks and looked at the three chaotic spirit beasts that were constantly retreating. Then, he gently tapped the heads of the three chaotic spirit beasts. Boom! The three chaotic spirit beasts seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. Their entire bodies felt as if they were carrying heavy mountains, and their massive bodies emitted crackling sounds. They tried to stand up and support themselves, but were pressed to the ground. They struggled desperately, but could not move at all. There were sounds of wailing. The three chaotic spirit beasts could only wail in low voices. Previously, they were still majestic and prideful when facing Perfected Lord Ziyuan, but now even standing up felt so difficult. Perfected Lord Ziyuan could not hide the shock in her eyes. Were these still three chaotic spirit beasts? If she had not seen them with her own eyes, she would not have believed it at all. Lin Feng did not even do anything. With a light tap, the three chaotic spirit beasts were suppressed on the ground and could not move at all. This capability had vaguely exceeded the scope of a perfected lord, shocking Perfected Lord Ziyuan. She had thought that there would be an intense battle. Perfected Lord Ziyuan was even prepared to help Lin Feng attack together to suppress the three mutated chaotic spirit beasts. Thank you, readers. But what was the situation now? The scene before her almost made Perfected Lord Ziyuan unable to believe her eyes. Lin Feng only pointed lightly, and the three insufferably arrogant chaotic spirit beasts were firmly suppressed. They lay on the ground, unable to even move or struggle. They even let out low whimpers, as befitting of the top Perfected Lord. A strange look flashed across Perfected Lord Ziyuan's eyes. It did not matter if Lin Feng had used a chaotic spirit treasure, some secret technique, or his own ability. Being able to easily suppress these three mutated chaotic spirit beasts meant that Lin Feng was undoubtedly the top perfected lord on the hallowed beast continent. In fact, in the entire chaos, Lin Feng was probably one of the best among perfected lords. Lin Feng walked up step by step and arrived in front of the three chaotic spirit beasts. Actually, these three chaotic spirit beasts were not so weak that they could be suppressed at will. However, no matter how they struggled, the cosmic power in Lin Feng's body would continue to suppress them. In the beginning, Lin Feng had only mobilized 10% of the cosmic power. That was already very terrifying, equivalent to cosmic power from a universe 10 billion light-years in diameter. But now, Lin Feng had already mobilized more than 40% of the cosmic power. Only then could he firmly suppress the three chaotic spirit beasts. With the power of Lin Feng's internal universe now, even if he did not completely use universe descending, he could still suppress powerful chaotic spirit beasts. There were sounds of wailing. The three chaotic spirit beasts could only lie on the ground and constantly wail in low voices. It even seemed very difficult for them to even open their mouths. Their chaotic bodies also collapsed one after another under the pressure of Lin Feng's internal universe. However, there was also the special bloodline power in the bodies of the three chaotic spirit beasts, which resisted the pressure of the universe in Lin Feng's body. It should be the divine beast bloodline in their bodies. Otherwise, if 40% of the cosmic power in the internal universe all descended, these three chaotic spirit beasts would have long been crushed into dust. Not bad. You can still hold out until now. Tell me, is the diabolic divine palace inside? Lin Feng asked indifferently. Then he eased the pressure slightly, allowing the three chaotic spirit beasts to speak. At this moment, the three chaotic spirit beasts were already incomparably terrified. Lin Feng walked over step by step without doing anything else. The three chaotic spirit beasts were suppressed and could not even resist. They even had a feeling that it would be a piece of cake for Lin Feng to kill them. He was even more terrifying than their king. Yes, the ruins are inside. The king once said that it's the ruin of the diabolic divine palace. Once one obtains the treasures in the diabolic god palace, the king can even become a divine beast. The three chaotic spirit beasts told him almost everything they knew, not daring to conceal anything. In any case, their king had subdued them through its powerful strength. Now that Lin Feng was clearly stronger, these three chaotic spirit beasts naturally knew what they should do. Lin Feng did not ask anymore. He immediately growled, "Retrieve!" Then, with a sweep of the cosmic power, the figures of the three chaotic spirit beasts instantly disappeared, and were already suppressed by Lin Feng in his internal universe. These were mutant chaotic spirit beasts that could greatly enhance Lin Feng's internal universe. Lin Feng would not let them off so easily. After putting away these three mutant chaotic spirit beasts, perfected Lord Ziyuan also flew over. He took a long look at Lin Feng and said, "I've long heard that perfected Lord Lin is the top perfected lord, and can kill chaotic spirit beasts. From the looks of it, the rumors are true. The title of the top perfected lord lives up to its name." Perfected Lord Ziyuan also gave up on what little competitive thoughts she had. She knew that she was not Lin Feng's match, but with the iridescent glazed pagoda in her possession, she was not afraid. This iridescent glazed pagoda was a chaotic spirit treasure. It was capable of both offense and defense, and was even stronger at defense. Forget about three mutated chaotic spirit beasts. Even 3 or 5 or 10 of them might not be able to do anything to perfected Lord Ziyuan. At the very least, self-preservation was not a problem. This was also why perfected Lord Ziyuan had come to the Sky Python Mountain 3 times. Even though she did not defeat the 3 mutant chaotic spirit beasts every time, she was safe and sound. Now that Lin Feng had collected 3 mutant chaotic spirit beasts, there were no more obstacles ahead. Perfected Lord Ziyuan was also very excited. "Perfected Lord, you flatter me. Your iridescent glazed pagoda is indeed worthy of being a chaotic spirit treasure. It's very extraordinary." This was the first time Lin Feng had seen a chaotic spirit treasure, so he was naturally very curious. "Perfected Lord Lin, you're also here for the diabolic divine palace. Why don't we go to the ruins of the diabolic divine palace together?" In all likelihood, no one in the entire hallowed beast continent knows the origins of the diabolic divine palace better than me, Perfected Lord Ziyuan said confidently. Oh? Do you know the origins of the diabolic divine palace? Perfected Lord. Lin Feng was somewhat persuaded. He was a little curious. Although he had heard about the diabolic divine palace, it was only some legends. Moreover, the origins of the diabolic divine palace were mysterious. He only knew that it had suddenly appeared on the hallowed beast continent, and should have originated from the chaos. However, Lin Feng did not know its exact origins. Now, from what Perfected Lord Ziyuan said, this diabolic divine palace seemed to have a complicated background. Seeing that Lin Feng was interested, Perfected Lord Ziyuan immediately said, I naturally know the origins of the diabolic divine palace. I once roamed the chaos and heard rumors about the diabolic divine palace. It's rumored that the owner of the diabolic divine palace is a mighty figure in the chaos called the diabolic deity. It's said that the diabolic deity had unparalleled divine ability and stood at the peak of the chaos as a top-notch perfected deity. The diabolic deity roamed the chaos and sensed that life on some savage chaotic continents were ignorant. They did not even cultivate. Hence, the diabolic deity established the diabolic divine palace and casually left behind some cultivation techniques as legacies. As long as one can pass the test of the diabolic deity and meet the requirements of the diabolic deity, they can accept the legacy and obtain the cultivation techniques. Therefore, legends about the diabolic divine palace circulated around many chaotic continents. Moreover, many diabolic divine palaces were indeed established, and there are still remnants of them in some chaotic continents. The diabolic deity is magnanimous and discriminate in teachings. Be it chaotic dire beasts, human cultivators, or even some with spirits and so on, anyone who can pass the test can enter the diabolic divine palace and obtain all kinds of cultivation techniques. Those are great opportunities. I've heard of them. Actually, I've also been to some chaotic continents. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the diabolic divine palace. Only on the hallowed beast continent did I discover traces of the diabolic divine palace. Unfortunately, in tens of thousands of years, due to the obstruction of the 3 chaotic spirit beasts, I couldn't find the diabolic divine palace. Perfected Lord Ziyuan told him everything, her tone filled with regret. So this is the legend of the diabolic divine palace. That diabolic deity is worthy of being the teacher of all living beings. However, you are already a peak perfected lord, yet you still wish to enter the diabolic divine palace. Could it be that the diabolic divine palace has cultivation techniques for becoming perfected deities? A sharp glint flashed across Lin Feng's eyes. Perfected Lord Ziyuan shook her head and suddenly said with a smile, Perfected Lord Lin, there's no need to probe. How can there be any cultivation techniques for becoming perfected deities in this world? At most, there can only be some notes from the cultivation experiences of the predecessors. Cultivators can only become perfected deities by relying on their own comprehension of the chaotic rules. Although there are no cultivation techniques for perfected deities in the diabolic divine palace, it's very likely that there are divine ability techniques, complete divine ability techniques. Perfected Lord Ziyuan's expression was solemn. Clearly, she was also thinking of finding the diabolic divine palace day and night for the complete divine ability technique. Complete divine ability technique? Lin Feng developed some interest as well. If it were just some ordinary cultivation techniques, chaotic martial arts, or chaotic spells, he would not be interested. However, divine ability techniques, especially complete divine ability techniques, would be very helpful to even Lin Feng. Even if he did not cultivate them, just referencing and comprehending them would be infinitely beneficial. All right, since there's the complete divine ability technique, how about we search for the ruins of the diabolic divine palace together, Perfected Lord? That would be wonderful. Lin Feng and Perfected Lord Ziyuan reached an agreement. The two parties did not have any conflicts of interest, so they could naturally join forces. After all, even if there was a divine ability technique, the two of them could cultivate it together. Perfected Lord Ziyuan needed to rely on Lin Feng's strength, and Lin Feng also needed to rely on Perfected Lord Ziyuan's knowledge of the diabolic divine palace. Otherwise, it would probably not be so easy for either of them to enter the diabolic divine palace alone. Let's hurry up and find the diabolic divine palace. There's very likely that an old flood dragon is still there. Perfected Lord Ziyuan immediately moved and led the way. Lin Feng followed behind unhurriedly, walking deeper into the Sky Python Mountain after her. In the depths of the Sky Python Mountain, as there were 3 mutant chaotic spirit beasts previously, there were actually no other chaotic dire beasts here. The lush leaves and lush greenery made it appear rather deep and ancient. Thank you, readers. Perfected Lord Ziyuan was also very cautious along the way. She basically kept the iridescent glazed pagoda with her the entire time, and paid attention to the surroundings at all times. According to Perfected Lord Ziyuan, there was still an old flood dragon. It was very extraordinary, and had a trace of the bloodline of the ancestral dragon. The so-called ancestral dragon was very extraordinary. The ancestral dragon was not a divine beast, but a hallowed beast. Dragons were licentious by nature, and the ancestral dragon was no exception. It had reproduced with many dire beast races in the chaos, such as true dragons and flood dragons. This old flood dragon actually had a trace of the ancestral dragon bloodline. Moreover, quite rarely it was able to activate this trace of ancestral dragon bloodline. The strength was very terrifying. Being able to subdue 3 mutant chaotic spirit beasts was enough to show how powerful the old flood dragon was. Hence, Perfected Lord Ziyuan did not dare to let her guard down at all. As the two of them went deeper, even Ao fell silent. It seemed to have sensed an unusual trace of oppressive aura, and became very quiet. Ha! Lin Feng suddenly looked up. He saw a palace ahead. Diabolic divine palace? Lin Feng said softly. That's right. It's the diabolic divine palace. As expected, there's indeed a diabolic divine palace in the hallowed beast continent. I've finally found it. Perfected Lord Ziyuan appeared very excited. She had traveled the chaos for so long, and had become a peak perfected lord a long time ago. She had been accumulating experience over time, trying to comprehend the chaotic rules. But how could the chaotic rules be so easy to comprehend? For tens of thousands of years, perfected Lord Ziyuan had not been able to improve at all. She could only constantly travel and roam the chaos, hoping to find opportunities. And she really did find an opportunity. The legend she had heard the most about in the chaos was the legend of the diabolic divine palace. That great and mysterious diabolic deity had left behind diabolic divine palaces in many chaotic continents. They contained all kinds of cultivation techniques, and there might even be complete divine ability techniques. These were techniques that top-notch perfected lords were eager to obtain. Even only as reference, these might allow them to gain a deeper understanding of certain rules in the chaos. Hence, how could perfected Lord Ziyuan not be excited to suddenly see the diabolic divine palace? This was an opportunity she had been looking for tens of thousands of years. Lin Feng's expression was also very solemn. From afar, the magnificent diabolic divine palace did not seem to have experienced the tide of time. It did not seem dilapidated, but emitted a vast and solemn aura. This was the diabolic divine palace, which offered countless living beings opportunities. Be careful of that old flood dragon. Perfected Lord Ziyuan's expression was solemn, and she did not continue forward. Lin Feng also saw that outside the diabolic divine palace, an incomparably huge flood dragon was lying on the ground, looking as if it was sleeping. Its entire body emitted a terrifying aura. Lin Feng had never seen a chaotic spirit beast with such a massive aura. Even the aura of the torch dragon was far inferior to the flood dragon in front of him. As for strength, it would depend on the innate abilities of the chaotic spirit beasts. However, for this old flood dragon to be able to make 3 mutant chaotic spirit beasts submit and call it a king, its strength was probably far from what ordinary chaotic spirit beasts could compare to. Cultivator, I remember your aura. Perfected Lord Ziyuan? In tens of thousands of years, you've already come to the Sky Python Mountain 3 times, but you were obstructed by those 3 fools each time. Looks like those 3 fools failed to stop you this time. The massive flood dragon slowly raised its head and opened its eyes. Its eyes seemed infinitely deep and vast, like the cosmos. Buzz. The iridescent glazed pagoda beside perfected Lord Ziyuan actually protected her automatically. It emitted traces of iridescent light, enveloping perfected Lord Ziyuan. The reason why spirit treasures were called spirit treasures was that they had a trace of sentience. When their master was threatened, they could also take the initiative to protect their master. Relying on this chaotic spirit treasure, perfected Lord Ziyuan roamed the chaos and survived countless calamities. Being able to make even the iridescent glazed pagoda take the initiative to protect its master was a sign of how powerful the enemy was. It even made the chaotic spirit treasure feel a trace of threat. As expected of the old flood dragon with the bloodline of the ancestral dragon. You've been here for at least 100,000 years, right? You must have entered the diabolic divine palace before, so you should know that you can only enter it once. There's only one chance. Once you've already entered it, you won't be able to enter it again. What's the use of staying here? Perfected Lord Ziyuan looked at the old flood dragon cautiously. That's right. One can only enter the diabolic divine palace once. However, I can't accept it. I was just a little bit away from finding the technique to become a divine beast. I was just a little bit away. The old flood dragon growled in a low voice. What's the use of not accepting it? What's not meant to be yours would never be yours. Do you think you can charge into the diabolic divine palace by force? The diabolic deity personally left this diabolic divine palace in the hallowed beast continent. Forget about you in the present. Even if you really became a divine beast, you can't possibly force your way into the diabolic divine palace. Perfected Lord Ziyuan shook her head. She knew a lot about the diabolic divine palace, and she also knew what a great entity the diabolic deity was in the chaos. That was a true top-notch perfected deity, who stood at the peak of the chaos. Ordinary perfected deities could not break into the diabolic divine palaces he had left behind, let alone charge in by force. If one wanted to enter the diabolic divine palace, they had to follow the rules of the diabolic divine palace. Every living being, be it chaotic dire beasts or cultivators, could only enter the diabolic divine palace once. Once they had entered it, they wouldn't ever be able to enter it again. Back then, the old flood dragon had entered the diabolic divine palace once and obtained a considerable opportunity. By relying on this opportunity, it even accidentally activated traces of the ancestral dragon bloodline in its body. As a chaotic hallowed beast, the ancestral dragon was one of the oldest and strongest entities among chaotic dire beasts. The bloodlines it left behind were simply too many to count. Although it was a hallowed beast, the bloodlines it left behind were spread throughout the entire chaos. Hence, it was not surprising that the old flood dragon had traces of the ancestral dragon bloodline. In fact, apart from the old flood dragon, there must be other chaotic dire beasts on the hallowed beast continent that also had the bloodline of the ancestral dragon. However, being able to activate traces of the ancestral dragon bloodline in the body like the old flood dragon was simply a stroke of luck. It was unimaginable. Even in the depths of the chaos, this could be considered a huge opportunity. It was precisely because the old flood dragon had accidentally entered the diabolic divine palace that it could receive such an opportunity. Unfortunately, after activating the ancestral dragon bloodline, the old flood dragon could not improve any further. If it wanted to become a chaotic divine beast, with the ancestral dragon bloodline in its body, there was actually a trace of hope. The hope was very slim, and even the direct descendants of the ancestral dragon rarely could become divine beasts, let alone the old flood dragon, who only had a trace of the bloodline of a hallowed beast in its body. However, there was ultimately a trace of hope. The old flood dragon would not give up. Hence, it wanted to enter the diabolic divine palace again. Unfortunately, no matter what method it thought of, and even when it controlled some other chaotic spirit beasts to enter the diabolic divine palace, it did not obtain what it wanted. Hence, the old flood dragon went on waiting. Even if it had to wait for thousands, tens of thousands of years, or even billions of years, it was willing to wait. In any case, the old flood dragon's lifespan was infinite now. Could afford to wait. It would wait until the prohibitions outside the diabolic divine palace slowly weakened. Perhaps one day it would be able to enter the diabolic divine palace again and obtain what it wanted. The old flood dragon raised his head and glanced at Lin Feng and perfected Lord Ziyun. It shook his head and said, "No matter how slim the hope is, I'll wait. As for the two of you, you could break through the obstruction of those three fools, so you can be considered extraordinary. However, opportunities are not that easy to obtain. Those three fools have followed me for so long, after all. I have to express something. Come, defeat me, and you can enter the diabolic divine palace." The old flood dragon's massive body began to move. It was like a small hill, full of oppressive aura. Defeat you? Thank you, readers. Perfected Lord Ziyun bit her lip. She was already helpless against those three strange chaotic spirit beasts just now. The old flood dragon in front of her had awakened the bloodline of a hallowed beast. He could even subdue the three mutant chaotic spirit beasts. There was no knowing how many times it was stronger than the three mutant chaotic spirit beasts. It was not that easy to defeat the old flood dragon. Old flood dragon, since you've already entered the diabolic divine palace before, what's the point of stopping us? If we enter, we have a chance to bring you what you want. Won't it be the best of both worlds? However, the old flood dragon was still unmoved. Instead, it shook its head and said, "In the diabolic god palace, chaotic dire beasts and human cultivators receive completely different opportunities. If you enter the diabolic divine palace, you will only obtain the techniques cultivated by human cultivators. It is impossible for you to obtain what I want. All right then, old flood dragon, let's see how strong you are." Perfected Lord Ziyun extended her hand and pointed, suddenly activating the iridescent glazed pagoda. Immediately, the iridescent glazed pagoda shone with extraordinary splendor, transforming into a huge pagoda that blotted out the sky. With infinite power, it descended from the sky and pressed down violently towards the old flood dragon. Boom! The iridescent glazed pagoda instantly pressed down. Traces of iridescent light attempted to suppress the old flood dragon at full force. However, the old flood dragon's massive body pushed forward like a giant. The huge iridescent glazed pagoda was actually lifted directly. At the same time, the old flood dragon slammed its claw towards the iridescent glazed pagoda. Thud! The huge iridescent glazed pagoda was actually sent flying. The spiritual light on the pagoda also flickered. Clearly, it had suffered a trace of damage. This was a chaotic spirit treasure, perfected Lord Ziyuan's trump card. Normally, it was always undefeated. Even if it was not a match, she could rely on the iridescent glazed pagoda to resist the enemy's attack. But now, the old flood dragon had sent the iridescent glazed pagoda flying with a single strike. This was enough to show how extraordinary it was. Perfected Lord Ziyuan was both shocked and furious. She retracted the iridescent glazed pagoda, but there was nothing she could do. She was not a match for those three chaotic spirit beasts. Now, she was not a match for this old flood dragon either. However, there was still Lin Feng next to her, and he had unfathomable strength. Perfected Lord Ziyuan could not help but look at Lin Feng beside her. Up until now, she admitted that she had yet to see Lin Feng's true strength. Even when dealing with the three mutant chaotic spirit beasts, Lin Feng had suppressed them without even attacking. Lin Feng looked at perfected Lord Ziyuan. Even when she used the chaotic spirit treasure, it was sent flying by the old flood dragon. This was enough to show how extraordinary the old flood dragon was. Lin Feng was not arrogant enough to think that he could crush everything with power and not take anything seriously. At the very least, the old flood dragon in front of him made Lin Feng feel a trace of solemnity. Terminus! Lin Feng attacked. Facing the old flood dragon, Lin Feng did not dare to be careless at all. Although he had not used the power of his internal universe, he had used the sixth form of the Heaven and Earth Seal. Currently, it was also Lin Feng's strongest chaotic martial art. Even ordinary chaotic spirit beasts would be killed by this strike from Lin Feng. What kind of martial art is this? Perfected Lord Ziyuan was very shocked. She was also a top-notch perfected lord and cultivated martial arts. She even cultivated perfected spirit martial arts. However, when she saw Lin Feng's palm strike now, she felt that all the perfected spirit martial arts she cultivated paled in comparison. It was not that Lin Feng's palm strike was too strong, nor was it too profound, but that there was an extreme charm to it, a sense of consummation. This was the feeling of martial arts reaching the extreme, and martial arts being completely consummate. There was no distinction of superiority or inferiority in martial arts. The difference lied in cultivators, the people who used martial arts. In terms of martial arts alone, perfected Lord Ziyuan was far inferior to Lin Feng. Technique borders on the principle. If he can comprehend martial arts to such an extent, it's only a matter of time before he comprehends chaotic rules, right? Perfected Lord Ziyuan muttered softly. She had traveled and roamed the chaos, so she naturally knew what Lin Feng's attainments in martial arts meant. Although she had cultivated a few perfected spirit martial arts, which all seemed very profound, they were completely insignificant before this palm strike by Lin Feng. This was already the strongest power an ordinary perfected lord could unleash without involving chaotic rules. Faced with this terminus form, the old flood dragon also felt threatened. It growled and extended its huge claw. This claw suddenly transformed into a dragon claw. Although it was not as profound as Lin Feng's martial arts attainments, it was natural, as if it was innately compatible with some chaotic rule, and had an indescribable style. Thud. This was a head-on clash. Palm and claw collided fiercely. Lin Feng's entire body shook. It was as if a giant dragon was roaring wildly in his ears. The power from the old flood dragon's claw was simply unparalleled. His entire body shook, and he could not help but take a few steps back. Lin Feng's body was already in turmoil. A terrifying power was washing through Lin Feng's chaotic body. However, Lin Feng had an internal universe. Hence, after this vast and terrifying power charged into the vast internal universe, it disappeared without a trace, and Lin Feng stopped. On the other hand, the old flood dragon's eyes narrowed slightly. When they clashed head-on just now, its body had shaken slightly. Clearly, it had also suffered a violent impact. Only by relying on the ancestral dragon bloodline in its body could it dissipate that enormous power. This was the first time the old flood dragon had encountered someone evenly matched with it in a pure competition of strength. Impressive old flood dragon. What an impressive ancestral dragon bloodline. Lin Feng suddenly flew over. He stood in the air, filled with battle intent. It had been a long time since he had encountered his match. Even the 3 mutant chaotic spirit beasts from before were only SOSO, and were easily suppressed by Lin Feng. When he used the 6th form, Terminus, Lin Feng was actually evenly matched with the old flood dragon, and was even slightly at a disadvantage. This had never happened since he mastered the Heaven and Earth seal. But now it was right in front of him. Lin Feng knew very well that he had met his match. The old flood dragon in front of him was very strong. It might be the strongest opponent Lin Feng had ever encountered. Even the torch dragon back then should not be comparable to the old flood dragon in front of him. Come on, fight! Lin Feng's battle intent soared. A huge phantom of a world appeared behind him, dreamlike, yet filled with a terrifying aura. The oppressive aura was unparalleled, and it howled as it pressed down majestically like a violent storm. Gore! The old flood dragon roared. Facing the suppression of Lin Feng's cosmic power, even though it was carrying an incredibly heavy weight, there was a faint and terrifying primordial power within it, supporting its body. An invisible aura swept over. The phantom of a giant dragon condensed above its head. Seeing this giant dragon, even Lin Feng could not help but be shocked. Ancestral dragon. This was the phantom of the ancestral dragon. It was just a phantom, yet it still had incredible divine ability and astonishing power. In terms of aura alone, it was actually comparable to Lin Feng's internal universe. The invisible confrontation between the two vaguely caused traces of ripples in the void. Even perfected Lord Ziyuan beside him could only activate the iridescent glazed pagoda to protect herself. Otherwise, she would not even be qualified to witness this great battle. They were both perfected lords and chaotic spirit beasts, but perfected Lord Ziyuan felt that she was on a completely different level from Lin Feng and the old flood dragon. As expected, in the vast chaos, there was always someone better. Relying on the chaotic spirit treasure, She had thought that she could dominate the chaos and be invincible among perfected lords. Now, it seemed like she was wrong, and very much so. However, she was lucky enough to witness this earth-shattering battle. Could also be considered an eye-opener. Universe descending. Thank you, readers. Lin Feng's expression was solemn. He felt a trace of threat. Hence, he did not hesitate anymore and used the power of the universe in his body with all his might. Immediately, the illusory world behind him seemed to gradually become corporeal. An aura 10 times heavier than before pressed down from all directions. The old flood dragon was shocked. It was also a little unable to withstand such a huge pressure. Ancestral dragon bloodline. The old flood dragon also instantly stimulated the ancestral dragon bloodline in its body. Immediately, the phantom of the giant dragon above its head seemed to have become much more condensed, turning into a giant dragon that stood tall in the sky and roared continuously. Boom! Lin Feng's cosmic power instantly descended and enveloped the old flood dragon. Suppress. Lin Feng did not move at all. However, in reality, his universe with a diameter of 100 billion light-years was already suppressing the old flood dragon's body with all its might. Even Lin Feng himself did not know how strong the cosmic power of a universe 100 billion light-years in diameter was. However, in any case, the torch dragon and those 3 strange chaotic spirit beasts were already suppressed by Lin Feng and completely immobile. It had to be known that these chaotic spirit beasts all had the bloodline of divine beasts and were very extraordinary. However, Lin Feng suppressed them with ease and almost did not encounter any difficulties. This was enough to show how strong his cosmic power was at this moment. Lin Feng even felt that he was almost invincible below the level of a perfected deity now. Even if there was a perfected deity, they would only know who was stronger after fighting. Gore. However, Lin Feng had clearly encountered his match this time. When his cosmic power descended, the universe with a diameter of 100 billion light-years was massive and vast. The strength was almost infinite. It could suppress the enemies and immobilize them, even in an instant. However, the old flood dragon in front of him, especially the phantom of the giant dragon behind him, suddenly roared. An incomparably terrifying power instantly tore apart Lin Feng's universe. There was a ripping noise. The universe was torn apart. Even though this little damage was not worth mentioning to the huge universe, the old flood dragon then waved its huge claw, coupled with the phantom of the giant dragon behind it. It tore apart Lin Feng's internal universe in a frenzy again and again. It was obvious that the old flood dragon was very tired. The phantom of the giant dragon above its head was also growing faint and dim. Presumably, that was the power of the ancestral dragon bloodline. However, activating the ancestral dragon bloodline to fight was actually a huge burden for the old flood dragon, and could not support a long battle. But what was the case for Lin Feng? It was actually not a big deal for his universe to be torn apart once or twice or 3 or 5 times. However, if it was torn apart 10 or 20 times, it would be a little troublesome. Even the universe would be damaged. More importantly, while the old flood dragon tore the universe apart in a frenzy, Lin Feng's cosmic power could not suppress the old flood dragon. After the old flood dragon tore it apart, it exited the universe directly. This was the first time Lin Feng had used his internal universe at full force against an opponent he could not suppress. At this moment, Lin Feng realized that he had been a little arrogant previously and underestimated the cultivators in the chaos. Be it chaotic spirit beasts or cultivators, he had underestimated them. If a peak perfected lord held a peak chaotic spirit treasure, how strong would they be? They would probably be able to tear apart Lin Feng's internal universe in an instant. His internal universe was far from invincible among those below the level of a perfected deity. It was ridiculous that Lin Feng had actually thought that he was comparable to a perfected deity previously. He had never seen a perfected deity before, so he naturally did not know how terrifying a perfected deity was. But now, as Lin Feng fought with the old flood dragon could tear apart his internal universe again and again. He could see that the old flood dragon's strength far exceeded that of the torch dragon or the 3 mutant chaotic spirit beasts. The torch dragon actually thought it could dominate the hallowed beast continent. it probably would not be able to get past the old flood dragon. The two of them did not continue fighting. Although Lin Feng's internal universe was torn apart again and again with the current size of his universe, such minor damage was not a big deal at all. It was the same for the old flood dragon. Although it was a little tired, if it really wanted to leave, Lin Feng could not trap it. At the very least, even if Lin Feng used all his methods, he could not do anything to the old flood dragon in front of him. The bloodline of a hallowed beast is indeed extraordinary. Lin Feng's gaze was very solemn. He knew that the phantom of the giant dragon above the old flood dragon's head should be the trace of the ancestral dragon bloodline in the old flood dragon's body. The ancestral dragon was a hallowed beast. There was no knowing how much stronger it was than a divine beast. This was only because the old flood dragon had a trace of the ancestral dragon bloodline. If its bloodline was rich, coupled with various opportunities, it might really be able to become a divine beast. After all, there were indeed some divine beasts among the descendants of the legendary ancestral dragon. Human cultivator. This is also the first time I've seen such a powerful perfected lord. He has a chance of becoming a perfected deity in the future. The old flood dragon's expression was also very solemn. It had always stayed in the sky python mountain and had never left it. It guarded outside the diabolic divine palace and waited quietly for opportunities. However, this did not mean that he did not know the situation in the outside world. The chaotic dire beasts in the entire sky python mountain were all the eyes and ears of the old flood dragon. Hence, the old flood dragon knew how many perfected lords were in the outside world, and that perfected Lord Ziyuan was the top perfected lord. Even perfected Lord Ziyuan was insignificant before the old flood dragon. If they really fought, even with the protection of a chaotic spirit treasure, perfected Lord Ziyuan might not be able to retreat unscathed. As for this unfamiliar perfected lord in front of him, the old flood dragon had almost no knowledge of him at all. It was as if he had appeared out of thin air, and actually made even it feel immense pressure. If it continued to fight, although it would not die, it could only avoid the brunt of it and escape for the time being. Hence, the old flood dragon did not attack again. Instead, it was very solemn. It temporarily retreated and acknowledged Lin Feng's strength. Please come in. You are qualified to enter the diabolic divine palace. The old flood dragon slowly took a few steps back and lay on the ground. Lin Feng cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, flood dragon." Lin Feng did not have any intentions to deal with the old flood dragon. Since the other party insisted on guarding this place, and had never left the sky python mountain, it could not be considered evil. Compared to the torch dragon's wicked ambition, the old flood dragon kept a much lower profile. As long as it did not leave the sky python mountain, and did not attack the cities of human cultivators, Lin Feng did not care about where the old flood dragon wanted to stay. Moreover, strictly speaking, Lin Feng was the one who broke into the sky python mountain and suppressed the 3 mutant chaotic spirit beasts. Lin Feng and the old flood dragon were both wary of each other, so they each relented a little. The old flood dragon could not stop Lin Feng, and Lin Feng could not kill the old flood dragon. They reached a compromise so Lin Feng could also enter the diabolic divine palace. Perfected Lord Ziyuan, let's go. Lin Feng glanced at perfected Lord Ziyuan, who appeared very excited. He hurriedly nodded and said, "Thank you, perfected Lord Lin." Perfected Lord Ziyuan knew very well that without Lin Feng, even if she did everything she could to defeat the 3 mutant chaotic spirit beasts, with the old flood dragon around, even if she cultivated for billions of years, without becoming a perfected deity, she probably would not be the old flood dragon's match. Entering the diabolic divine palace was almost a fool's dream. However, with Lin Feng around now, everything became so simple. She could also enter the diabolic divine palace. The ruins of the diabolic divine palace in front of him looked magnificent, emitting a profound and magnificent aura that made one feel incomparably holy. Perfected Lord Ziyuan took a deep breath and no longer hesitated. She and Lin Feng stepped into the diabolic divine palace one after another. Buzz. Thank you, readers. A layer of gray light appeared, like a barrier. When Lin Feng stepped into the diabolic divine palace and passed through the gray light, it was as if he had stepped into another world. The palace in front of them instantly disappeared. They had already entered the hall of the palace. Even perfected Lord Ziyuan beside Lin Feng had disappeared, and Lin Feng did not notice at all. What a bizarre place. Lin Feng's heart was solemn. He did not know what this place was, nor did he know what was going on. He had heard some rumors about the diabolic divine palace in the first place, in addition to perfected Lord Ziyuan's introduction. It was established by the legendary diabolic deity. Every living being, be it chaotic dire beasts or human cultivators, would encounter opportunities as long as they stepped into the diabolic divine palace. However, what these opportunities came to would depend on the fate of the living beings themselves. Perhaps perfected Lord Ziyuan had already been teleported to another place in the diabolic divine palace. The two of them were separated. Although he had not heard of any danger in the diabolic divine palace, Lin Feng was very cautious. The cosmic power in his body was also filled in his body. He even used his perfected spirit to check around. The surroundings were densely covered in chaotic rules. All kinds of chaotic rules completely sealed this place, preventing Lin Feng from sensing any movement from the outside world. Even his mental power could only sense areas within a radius of 30 feet. As for areas beyond 30 feet, his mental power could not sense them. Hence, it was completely impossible to rely on his mental power to investigate. Lin Feng looked around and realized that there were a total of 3 passages. There was a passage in the middle and 2 passages on the left and right. There were no hints, and his mental power could not detect them. Clearly, if he wanted to obtain opportunities, he had to choose one of these 3 passages to enter. Lin Feng chose the rightmost passage, relying entirely on his intuition. Then, without any hesitation, he strode into the rightmost passage. This passage seemed to lead to another world. Lin Feng's figure flashed, and he was teleported to a sealed secret chamber again. This was a circular secret chamber. There were many small secret chambers around it, and they emitted a glowing light. Lin Feng scanned with his mental power. Immediately, many messages appeared in his mind. Martial arts, spells, rare treasures, artifacts, spirit treasures, divine abilities, rules. Many messages appeared in Lin Feng's mind. He also gradually learned that every secret chamber represented a certain kind of opportunity. For example, if the information in the first secret chamber was martial arts, there would be various kinds of martial arts inside. If one chose to enter the second secret chamber, it would be spells, and they could choose various kinds of spells. Lin Feng's horizons were broadened. He wanted to enter every secret chamber. Unfortunately, according to the information he obtained in his mind, every living being could only enter one of the secret chambers. Where did perfected Lord Ziyuan go? Lin Feng was hesitating, not knowing which secret chamber to choose. However, an idea flashed through his mind. He suddenly thought of perfected Lord Ziyuan. He had not seen perfected Lord Ziyuan since he entered the diabolic divine palace. Could there be other places with legacies here? Lin Feng did not know. He had a feeling that this diabolic divine palace was mysterious at every turn. Lin Feng shook his head. He eliminated 4 secret chambers and 4 choices first. However, Lin Feng did not want to miss any of the spirit treasures, divine abilities, or rules next. Up until now, Lin Feng had only seen perfected Lord Ziyuan's iridescent glazed pagoda. He also wanted to see more spirit treasures, and even obtain a chaotic spirit treasure. However, if he had to choose between a spirit treasure or a divine ability, Lin Feng could only resign himself and give up on the spirit treasure. After all, no matter how strong a chaotic spirit treasure was, could it be stronger than his internal universe? Even if there was a spirit treasure comparable to a chaotic perfected deity, would the diabolic deity leave such a spirit treasure in the diabolic divine palace? Lin Feng shook his head. Perhaps there were spirit treasures in the diabolic divine palace, but their power would definitely be limited. There were still divine abilities and rules left. This was a dilemma. Lin Feng originally only wanted to seek the complete divine ability technique, but now, he realized that there were actually rules as well. A perfected deity had some comprehension of all kinds of chaotic rules. If one wanted to become a perfected deity, they did not just need to comprehend 1 or 2 rules. They had to learn and synergize a multitude of them, and keep all kinds of rules at their fingertips. Lin Feng did not know what was in the Chamber of Rules, but it was almost impossible that it would help cultivators to comprehend the rules. If it could really help cultivators comprehend the rules, perfected deities in the chaos would not be so rare. At most, it would manifest some rules. However, Lin Feng had the chaotic origin stone, and there was not even a time limit. Why would he waste the precious opportunity of entering the diabolic divine palace? I'll choose the divine ability. Lin Feng made up his mind. He had already made the decision to choose the secret chamber of divine ability. Hence, he strode towards the secret chamber of divine ability. Rumble. The door of the secret chamber of divine ability slowly opened. Lin Feng's figure flashed, and he had already entered the secret chamber of divine ability. Swoosh. Lin Feng's figure blurred, and he appeared in a relatively small and crude secret chamber. Apart from a futon for sitting cross-legged, the rest of the place was bare. It looked more like a cultivation secret chamber. Where is the divine ability technique? Lin Feng frowned. Then he saw an exquisite wooden box in front of the futon. The box was not locked. Lin Feng gently opened it. A dazzling golden light appeared in the box. It was a gold foil. Gold foil! Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat. Then he picked up the gold foil and took a look. Ennead Wind Flame Divine Ability. This was clearly a divine ability technique, and a complete one at that. Lin Feng took a cursory look before he grew excited. This was the most suitable divine ability for him. It was a divine ability that required him to comprehend the rule of fire and the rule of wind. Moreover, he could cultivate them independently. For example, he could cultivate a fire-type divine ability first, then cultivate a wind-type divine ability. Finally, he could combine them into one to form the Ennead Wind Flame divine ability. However, before Lin Feng could return to his senses, he realized that the gold foil had begun to burn fiercely. It was the chaotic flames, and even Lin Feng could not stop it. In the blink of an eye, the gold foil had been burned to ashes. This divine ability could only be viewed for a limited period of time. Once time passed, it would automatically self-destruct. Once Lin Feng obtained this divine ability would be missing from the diabolic divine palace on the hallowed beast continent from then on. However, there were no restrictions on this divine ability. In other words, this divine ability could be imparted. This was a complete divine ability technique. Countless perfected lords would go insane over it. Even some perfected deities would not underestimate this divine ability. It was simply a priceless treasure. However, the diabolic deity kept it in the diabolic divine palace, and did not even prohibit others from imparting it privately. Lin Feng could not help but admire the magnanimity of the diabolic deity. Even Lin Feng himself might not be able to help others selflessly without asking for anything in return like this. According to the information they obtained, the cultivator could cultivate in seclusion in the secret chamber for 3 months. Hence, Lin Feng simply sat on the futon and began to adjust his mentality. He gradually calmed his emotions and prepared to study this divine ability. Even if he only cultivated flames first, the Ennead Wind Flame divine ability was not that simple. This divine ability was also very extraordinary, and was divided into chaotic astral winds and chaotic flames. The two had a total of 9 levels, and each level was stronger than the last. Thank you, readers. At only the first level, one would be comparable to a powerful perfected deity, and much stronger than ordinary perfected deities. At the second or third level, one would almost be able to resist a top-notch chaotic spirit treasure head-on. As for the 4th, 5th, and 6th levels, those who had reached these levels were basically all famous powerful perfected deities in the chaos. If the 9 levels were combined, the power of this divine ability could almost approach those greater divine abilities indefinitely. Divine abilities were also divided into lesser divine abilities, greater divine abilities, and the legendary ultimate divine abilities cultivated using certain special chaotic rules. Most perfected deities basically cultivated lesser divine abilities. Once a greater divine ability was successfully cultivated, it would possess infinite power. As for the infinite divine ability, almost no one in the vast chaos could successfully cultivate it. The infinite divine ability was a great entity that could suppress chaotic divine beasts, comparable to chaotic hallowed beasts, and second only to hallowed venerables. These were all kinds of information Lin Feng also obtained from the Ennead Wind Flame divine ability. It was unknown if the diabolic deity had left this information on purpose, or because cultivating a divine ability required understanding of divine abilities. However, the distinction in divine abilities did broaden Lin Feng's horizons, allowing him to have a more direct understanding of divine abilities. Although the Ennead Wind Flame divine ability was only a lesser divine ability, there was still a huge gap between lesser divine abilities. Even cultivating it was extremely difficult, and there were a total of 9 levels. He still had to comprehend the chaotic rule of fire and chaotic rule of wind, and these 2 rules were only the foundation. Without becoming a perfected deity, it's too difficult to cultivate divine abilities. Lin Feng shook his head. He had just cultivated the divine ability for chaotic flames. Even though it was only a part of this divine ability, after cultivated it for too long, he kept shaking his head. It was too difficult. His current comprehension of the chaotic rule of fire was only half-baked. Even cultivating the first level of the divine ability of flames was very difficult. However, there were also upsides to this. Even if he could not cultivate the divine ability, Lin Feng could gain a deeper understanding of the chaotic rule of fire via cultivating this divine ability. Time passed slowly. Lin Feng even used the chaotic origin stone to manifest chaotic flames in the chaotic origin stone. In addition, there was also information on the cultivation of chaotic flames in the Ennead Wind Flame divine ability. Hence, in the past 3 months, Lin Feng's understanding of the chaotic rule of fire improved at lightning speed. He even used the chaotic flames accumulated by the Heart of Fire to perfectly integrate the Heart of Fire into the cultivation of the Ennead Wind Flame divine ability. This caused Lin Feng's cultivation speed for this divine ability to soar. Although he was only cultivating the divine ability related to chaotic flames first, with the help of the Heart of Fire, Lin Feng was already on the verge of successfully cultivating the first level of the chaotic flames divine ability. As 1 month, 2 months, 3 months passed, boom! Suddenly, a burst of incomparably majestic chaotic flames spewed out of the secret chamber, vaguely forming a sphere. Although this sphere of flames was very small, it contained astonishing power. Lin Feng was overjoyed. In 3 months, with the addition of the chaotic origin stone, the technique for the Ennead Wind Flame divine ability, and the Heart of Fire he had cultivated previously, Lin Feng successfully cultivated the first level of the chaotic flames divine ability in the Ennead Wind Flame divine ability. This was originally a divided divine ability. Only when combined would it form the Ennead Wind Flame divine ability. When separated, it would only be a chaotic flames divine ability with ordinary power. Of course, this power was ordinary to perfected deities. However, to those chaotic perfected lords, the power of this divine ability was simply boundless. Anyone who clashed with it would die, and those who came into contact with it would be injured. No matter how weak its power was, it was still a divine ability. Of course, Lin Feng still had not become a perfected deity. If he wanted to become a perfected deity, he needed to have a deep understanding of chaotic rules, and more than just one rule. Although Lin Feng had cultivated the chaotic flames divine ability now, he actually did not have a deep understanding of the rule of chaotic flames. It was only by following the technique of the divine ability, coupled with the Heart of Fire, that he managed to luck out and master the first level. Of course, this was only the first level. It was almost impossible to improve further, unless Lin Feng could completely comprehend the chaotic rule of fire. In the vast chaos, there were all kinds of possibilities. It was possible that some perfected lords could only comprehend 1 or 2 chaotic rules, but could not comprehend more rules, and could not perceive the mysteries of the chaotic rules. Such perfected lords could also cultivate some kind of special divine ability, but that was all. They were not perfected deities, nor were they perfected lords. They were called semi-perfected deities. However, there were very, very few semi-perfected deities. For most perfected lords, as long as they comprehended some chaotic rule, they would be able to see the essence. Through integration and drawing connections, they could even comprehend various other chaotic rules, and thus become a perfected deity. Lin Feng's current state was somewhat similar to that of a semi-perfected deity. But there were also some differences. It's about time. Lin Feng calculated the time. It had already been 3 months. According to the information he had obtained in the secret chamber previously, he could only cultivate in the secret chamber for 3 months. This was a secret chamber, and there was no array. Lin Feng was also interested to see how he would leave the secret chamber when the time was up. Not long after, Lin Feng's perfected spirit sensed that there seemed to be an invisible chaotic rule in the secret chamber, vast and mysterious, enveloping his body directly. Cosmic power. Lin Feng immediately mobilized the cosmic power. He also wanted to see if resisting by force could allow him to continue staying in the diabolic divine palace. If he could continue staying in the diabolic divine palace, wouldn't he be able to open other secret chambers and obtain various divine abilities or treasures? However, when Lin Feng mobilized the cosmic power and tried to resist that mysterious and vast chaotic rule, he realized that his figure blurred slightly. Then he disappeared from the secret chamber. When he reappeared, he was already outside the diabolic divine palace. Ha! Lin Feng opened his eyes and realized that his body was still filled with cosmic power. He was even still in the same posture as when he used the cosmic power to resist the chaotic rule. However, it was clearly useless. Chaotic rule of space. Lin Feng muttered word by word. Only the chaotic rule of space could teleport him out unharmed with ease. As expected of the diabolic divine palace established by the diabolic deity. The chaotic rule of space was so powerful, and all kinds of chaotic rules were at his fingertips. This was a perfected deity, an invincible perfected deity. Without reaching the perfected deity realm, one would never be able to imagine how powerful a perfected deity was. Even if Lin Feng used the cosmic power, it was still useless before the chaotic rule of a perfected deity. This chaotic rule could teleport Lin Feng outside intact. This also meant that this chaotic rule could just as well easily kill Lin Feng. Even with the internal universe, it was useless. For the first time, Lin Feng felt the diabolic deity was unfathomable. His expression was very solemn. Suddenly, Lin Feng realized that there was another fluctuation of the chaotic rule of space near him. Immediately next, a familiar figure appeared outside the diabolic divine palace. Perfected Lord Ziyuan? A strange look flashed across Lin Feng's eyes. Previously, he had never seen perfected Lord Ziyuan in the diabolic divine palace. He thought that perfected Lord Ziyuan had gone somewhere else, or that something had happened to her. From the looks of it, perfected Lord Ziyuan had also been teleported out by the diabolic divine palace after 3 months. However, there was no knowing what kind of opportunity perfected Lord Ziyuan had obtained. Perfected Lord Ziyuan was still a little confused. When she looked up and saw Lin Feng, a trace of surprise appeared in her eyes. Thank you, readers. Perfected Lord Lin? I've left the diabolic divine palace. It was as if perfected Lord Ziyuan still could not quite believe that she had already left the diabolic divine palace. Swoosh. Perfected Lord Ziyuan still wanted to try to enter the diabolic divine palace again. However, where there was no obstruction previously, a layer of grayish-white light ejected perfected Lord Ziyuan immediately when she tried to enter again. If she continued to barge in by force, she would even be attacked. This was the diabolic divine palace established by the diabolic deity. Even ordinary perfected deities would find it relatively difficult to barge in by force, let alone perfected lords. Perfected Lord Ziyuan, once one leaves the diabolic divine palace, they can't enter it anymore. Did you obtain any divine ability techniques in the diabolic divine palace? Lin Feng asked. He was also very curious. Perfected Lord Ziyuan seemed to have gained a lot, but she did not seem satisfied. Perfected Lord Ziyuan was stunned for a moment, then shook her head and said, I didn't obtain any divine ability techniques. Instead, I went to the rules chamber to comprehend the chaotic rule. I did gain some insights, but at the critical moment, I was teleported out directly. Lin Feng came to a realization. So she had been teleported out at the critical moment of comprehension. This was indeed a little unfortunate. This kind of insight at the critical moment concerned whether perfected Lord Ziyuan could advance further and completely comprehend a chaotic rule. Unfortunately, from the looks of it, perfected Lord Ziyuan still needed to spend some effort to comprehend it. The two of you have already entered the diabolic divine palace. It's impossible for you to enter again. Leave, leave. The old flood dragon opened its eyes and looked at Lin Feng and perfected Lord Ziyuan. It appeared very calm. Old flood dragon, do you know of any other way that can allow us to enter the diabolic divine palace again? In the end, perfected Lord Ziyuan was still a little unwilling. It was not easy for her to enter the diabolic divine palace, and such an opportunity could only be chanced upon by luck. She was even confident that if she could stay inside for a while longer, she would definitely be able to comprehend a chaotic rule. This chaotic rule was not to be underestimated. Perhaps a chaotic rule was far from enough for her to become a perfected deity, but this chaotic rule was an opening, a point for breakthrough. Only by relying on this chaotic rule did perfected Lord Ziyuan have a chance of comprehending more chaotic rules and becoming a perfected deity. Unfortunately, such an opportunity would never come again. The old flood dragon glanced at perfected Lord Ziyuan and shook its head. If there was any other way, I wouldn't have waited here for tens of thousands of years. Leave. This is not a place for you to stay. No, there must be another way. For example, we can let more cultivators enter. If 1 isn't enough, we can get 10. If 10 isn't enough, we can get 100. The diabolic divine palace claims that every living being has a chance. In that case, isn't this our opportunity? Perfected Lord Ziyuan's words actually tempted Lin Feng. That's right. The diabolic divine palace claimed that every living being had the same opportunity. Lin Feng had only obtained one divine ability technique, but there was definitely more than one divine ability technique in the diabolic divine palace. There were still many divine ability techniques. They were very good even just for reference. Moreover, not only were there divine ability techniques, there were also all kinds of artifacts and even spirit treasures. Heh! The old flood dragon only laughed mockingly and did not say anything. Lin Feng pondered for a moment before an idea came to him. 3,000 universe demons. Lin Feng immediately summoned one of the 3,000 universe demons. Swoosh! A universe demon appeared in front of Lin Feng. It had already metamorphosed into a chaotic life form. As the universe in Lin Feng's body expanded wildly, the 3,000 universe demons had long metamorphosed into chaotic life forms. Greetings, Father Deity. The universe demon was very respectful to Lin Feng, causing perfected Lord Ziyuan and the old flood dragon beside him to reveal strange expressions. Enter the diabolic divine palace and obtain a divine ability technique. Lin Feng gave a few instructions to the universe demon. The intelligence of these universe demons was no different from that of cultivators. He naturally nodded, then strode towards the diabolic divine palace. Buzz. As soon as the universe demon entered the diabolic divine palace, he was instantly swept into it and disappeared. Lin Feng heaved a sigh of relief instead. As long as the universe demon could enter, things would be easy. Perfected Lord Lin, is that your subordinate? Perfected Lord Ziyuan asked in confusion. That's right, he's definitely reliable. These universe demons were absolutely loyal, so there was no need to worry about their loyalty. Lin Feng was only summoning one universe demon now to see the outcome. If possible, he would send all 3,000 universe demons into the diabolic divine palace. At that time, the entire diabolic divine palace would probably be emptied out by the 3,000 universe demons. However, if that was all it took, Lin Feng wondered if this was a little too easy. If both he and perfected Lord Ziyuan could think of this method, how could the old flood dragon, who had guarded the diabolic divine palace for tens of thousands of years, not have thought of this method? Considering the old flood dragon's strength as the ruler of the Sky Python Mountain, who had also subdued 3 of the mutant chaotic spirit beasts, it was not difficult for it to order these chaotic spirit beasts to enter the diabolic divine palace in the first place. How could the old flood dragon not have done it? Or perhaps the things obtained by the chaotic dire beasts were different from those obtained by human cultivators. However, the old flood dragon could still capture some human cultivators and coerce and bribe them. In short, there must be a way. However, the old flood dragon did not do so. This was a little strange. Time passed slowly. Lin Feng and perfected Lord Xuan simply sat cross-legged on the ground and waited quietly. They were prepared to wait for 3 months. Perhaps the universe demon would come out then. Swoosh! Suddenly, only an hour later, a figure staggered out of the diabolic god palace. It was the universe demon from before. Huh? What happened? Lin Feng's expression changed as he hurriedly asked. Father Deity, I didn't obtain anything. After entering the diabolic god palace, there seemed to be a mysterious rule enveloping me, and I was sent out. The universe demon reported truthfully. How could this be? Lin Feng frowned, not knowing what was going on at all. Heh, did you think it would be so easy? The diabolic divine palace doesn't have that many loopholes for you to exploit. Although the diabolic divine palace treats every living being equally, be it cultivators or chaotic dire beasts, not everyone who enters can obtain treasures or legacies. It depends on opportunities. The two of you are already lucky to be able to obtain treasures. As for you trying to order others to enter, that's wishful thinking. Moreover, if you enter it too many times, the diabolic divine palace will even disappear. Even if someone is lucky enough to enter, they might not be able to obtain what you hope for. Therefore, what you get from the diabolic divine palace depends on your fate. Fate has it that it ends here for you. Leave. The old flood dragon's words seemed to make sense, but Lin Feng still wanted to give it a try. 3,000 universe demons. Go to the diabolic divine palace to search for divine ability techniques. Lin Feng simply summoned all 3,000 universe demons and sent 3,000 universe demons into the diabolic divine palace. He wanted to see if it was as the old flood dragon had said, that he would find nothing.